Well, hey there. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you have to check out the PCOS Revolution Academy, where we go through all of these topics in an easy to follow, totally online, step-by-step process so you can stop giving PCOS the upper hand. Join me over at thepcosrevolution.com/join, and I'd love to have you join me inside of the Academy. See you there. I'm Duro, and you're listening to the PCOS Revolution podcast. Well, hello and welcome back to the PCOS Revolution podcast. I have here today with me Emilee, who wants to share her story about her PCOS struggle. And she's also a member of our 90-day reset program as well. And I just wanted her to talk to you guys today because she definitely has had a long struggle with PCOS. And she'd just like to kind of, give you a clue about what has been helpful for her. And I think you'll get a lot of information and value out of this. So welcome, Emilee.
Hi.
So tell me about when you started noticing that you might have symptoms of PCOS, or did it take you a while to get diagnosed?
So my mom and my younger sister both were diagnosed when I was pretty young. I can't even remember how they figured it out with my younger sister, but it was almost assumed with me because my periods were never frequent. They were always kind of really sporadic. It was like I got my first period like 3 different times in my teenage life. It would just like randomly happen. And so it was kind of just assumed that I had PCOS. And then I think when I was about 16, I went to the doctor and officially was diagnosed.
Okay, so you had a family history. So it made it a little easier, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, And so what kind of treatment did you get when you first found out?
When I first found out, it was birth control. Definitely. That was the first thing that was prescribed to me. And that was pretty much it. I didn't even know what PCOS was. I just knew that it meant I didn't get my period regularly. And that was it. And so I had birth control probably up until I was like 22.
Okay. And you're still in your 20s, right? How old?
Yeah, I'm 28. So.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you feel like was your biggest obstacle? So they diagnosed you with PCOS and they gave you birth control and you were on it for about 8 years, I guess, or no, 6 years or so?
Yeah.
Okay. And how about when did you start noticing like, okay, now it's time to get off and kind of sync my cycles and figure out what's going on, or what, how did you actually realize it was time to get off?
So I actually stopped using birth control, and my husband and I decided that we were ready to, just kind of see what happens. And so I was probably 23 or so, I'm not sure. But, so once I got off of birth control, I didn't even really know what it meant to have PCOS, kind of like what I said before. So when I got off, I didn't even know what I should be looking for, what was normal. So it was kind of figuring out what is a normal cycle and what that means for my body was really weird.
Yes. And what happened? Did you get your cycle right away, or did it take some time?
No, I'm pretty sure like when I went off of birth control, I cycled, and then it was like, it went back to what it was before, where it was like once, maybe twice a year.
Okay.
And that was it. And it was just my period. I don't even know that I was ovulating, to be honest. I'm not sure.
That's so basically just, it kind of came and went whenever.
Yep.
And did you feel like, okay, I want to do something about this? Or was it like, well, maybe I'll figure out, when I want to get pregnant, I'll kind of address it then, or what happened during that time?
Yeah, I have always been, of my family, I'm probably the one that's a little bit more natural. Both my mom and my sister, they kind of went the more like they did the metformin. They both had weight loss surgery, and they kind of did things a little bit different. So like I kind of saw their journey, and I knew that for me, I wanted it to be a little bit more natural. And I wanted to do the best that I could with that. So I did the best I could as far as research goes, and like to see what I could do and what was in my control, and it just got more overwhelming.
Yeah,
I didn't even know what I was doing. It honestly probably made it more scary.
And there's so much you can Google and they're like, wow, it's too much.
Yeah, I knew too much.
And so then you started to research more about natural treatments and that sort of thing. And you came across our podcast, right?
Yep.
So that was a while ago. What was it? Probably a year ago? Was it 6 months ago?
Yeah, I think that was back in July.
Oh,
that,
yeah.
Well, that would have been a couple more months before. I think I did the Dutch test in July.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I remember you reached out to me with email because you don't live in Florida. You're in a different part of the United States, in the Midwest. And I remember you reached out to me and you wanted to kind of figure out what your hormones were doing. So we kind of developed a plan over email, like, okay, we have, what's your cycle like and what sort of hormone test have you had and all of that. And this was before we actually had our program in place, our 90-day, but just really kind of corresponding back and forth with email. And so tell me about what you started implementing when you first wanted to get your cycle on track.
I think a couple months before that, I had been trying to eat a little bit healthier, where I had ruled out gluten and dairy, and I'd been taking a bunch of vitamins, and I didn't really know what was going to stick. That's kind of how it always felt like. I was throwing a bunch of stuff at a board, hoping something worked.
Yes.
And yeah, just one day while I was working out, I listened to the podcast and I was like, all right, I think this is who I need to talk to. Okay. So I sent you an email and we went over my hormones and figured out what worked best for me. But up until then, it was a lot of guessing. I think that was probably one of the hardest things. Was there's not a lot of research. So it's a bunch of people who have blogs, which is great, but it's not like a one size fits all. Usually I think there's a lot of things that work great for PCOS in general, but when it comes to what vitamin should I be taking, or what's right for my body, I needed some more one-on-one help.
Yeah, definitely. It can be very confusing. There's different types of PCOS and there's different challenges with each type. And so we did your Dutch test, which is, for anyone not familiar, we did an episode on this last season with Dr. Carrie Jones. She is the medical director for Precision Analytical, which is a company who actually has a Dutch test. And she is actually joining us in our 90-day group next month, actually, just to do a Facebook Live with our members and kind of go over what to look for and why it's important. But it's basically a 14-page essay on your hormones. I mean, it is very in-depth. It gives you not only your cortisol, all your stress hormones, but your female reproductive hormones. It has testosterone, lipid, androgen panel in there. And then it has neurotransmitters and all kinds of B12 and B6 markers, metabolites. So there's just so much there. And so what I like about it is the timing of the test. It's actually done in the luteal phase. So it's done after you ovulate and or the latter part of your cycle. And most tests that we look at for hormones are done during your period. So this one is a little different. And that's why I like it. It's dried urine. So it's basically just peeing on a few filter strips and sending them to the lab at different, you're actually using those tests at different times between evening and morning. So we're really going to see what your hormones are like. So that's where we started. And we looked at the picture of your hormones, especially in that second phase of your cycle, to figure out if you were ovulating, and also if you were ovulating, what was going on around the time when implantation should be happening or just before it. So since you are trying to conceive. So tell us about what you learned from that test and if you felt that was helpful.
It was. I remember for me, I didn't have a cycle. So I think we had to just start the test to see what was even going on to figure out a way to start the cycle. I don't even remember much about the test, but I do remember that we went over it and it was my estrogen and my testosterone were just way off of where they should be.
Yeah.
Which were some big ones. And so I know that we went over that and narrowed it down onto what I should be taking and the 10 vitamins that I was taking that I don't need to anymore.
Yeah.
Those out, which helped a lot.
And that's what we see in our clinic a lot of times. People come in with a big grocery bag full of supplements. So we're okay, let's read all the labels. Let's look at these things and let's see if they're really needed or not. And if they're, being duplicated. And sometimes they're just not needed at all. There's so many things rule out, because you're kind of confusing the body if you're throwing too much at it, I think. So we looked at that. We just narrowed it down to just a few things that would be really important for you based on your results and your symptoms. And we also use Chinese herbs as well, right? So you're really diligent with that. And now you have some news to share, right?
Yeah. I am 7 weeks pregnant. Just pretty exciting. I was to the point where I was like, I don't even know if this is ever going to work.
It was about 6 months, right, of taking the herbs?
Yeah, I think so. Which it wasn't even like the patience of doing the whole system. I think it was just PCOS can be so daunting in general and kind of scary to where you're like, I don't know what's going to stick, But I think I started the supplement and Blossom back in July. We did move this winter. So I took 2 months off from taking the supplements because it was a little crazy around here. And then in March, I started my period on my own, figured sure, and started taking the herbs and vitamins and everything, got everything back in order, and it worked, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was great. I think you were about to take another Dutch test, right? Or did you take?
Yeah, we were going
to. Okay. Yeah, and then you were pregnant, so that was great. And our office actually mailed you the supplements because we have a formula that we use that's actually in 4 different phases. So it can actually help create a cycle if it's not there. We've done that with patients who have not had a cycle in like years, and it starts to regulate. So it can help with ovulation for sure. And so it's just a really neat approach that's been used in China when treating infertility and PCOS for many, many years. So that's something that you were really diligent with, which is it's actually, the capsules can be quite daunting too when you add everything up. Because we have that formula in tea form, which is a little bitter, and then we have it in capsule form. And most people like capsules better. The taste is a little, you don't have to worry about that. And but the key is to take it every day. So it's kind of like we call it our herbal Clomid, but we don't want to compare it to Clomid because there's not really any, there's not the side effects that Clomid could have down the road. So when you started with the Chinese herbs, what did you start noticing?
I started my period, I think maybe 2 weeks after I started Blossom. I think we kind of started it to initiate the cycle, and then I started the Blossom back at phase 1. So I noticed that right away. And then I think it was like my cycle was like 35 days long, which is quite a bit shorter.
Yeah, I'd say 6 months compared to 35 days.
Yeah, so it was a pretty big improvement.
And was it painful? Did you have any cramping or anything like that with your cycles, or no?
No, it was pretty smooth. It was really interesting to kind of like understand. I don't know. My friends are pretty open with their bodies and like what they're going through throughout the month. And like what to look for. And I'm always like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if I get a headache around that time of the month, So
because you didn't have a cycle.
I don't know. So it was just kind of interesting. I just kind of got to see how everything would work for me. And I could tell I had like a lot more like mental clarity too pretty quickly, which really helped.
As your hormones get more balanced, you start to feel more energy and definitely less headaches sometimes and that sort of thing. That's what a lot of people have noticed just by, helping. I believe that there is a good effect with Chinese herbs in helping to regulate glucose too. And then also you incorporated the ovasitol, right? And I believe we did vitamin D, but I'm not sure. I can't remember if we did. Yeah. Okay. So you had those that you're really diligent with. And then so you were charting as well, your temperatures, or how did you know that you might be pregnant as opposed to a long cycle?
Charting. Charting. Yeah.
It's the best, right? It's free. It totally tells you, it saves you so much money on pregnancy tests.
You really get to that's kind of what one of my clues was that I was ovulating too, because it was, I think it was about a week later in my cycle that I noticed my temperatures change, and I was like, oh, this means something.
Yeah. And I reached out to you, I know, like a couple months back. I was like, hey, Emilee, I have this program and I want you to be in it.
Yeah.
There's like everything we talked about and our emails and all that. I finally put it into a portal, and like every week there's new stuff. And I think you'll like it because we have the nutrition, like the Mediterranean plan and like all the different nutritional stuff, and all it just breaks it down so much easier. So we talk about charting in one of those weeks. I don't know if you even made it that far.
Yeah.
Pregnancy. So that was week 3. And so we started talking about VBT charting and all that. But I know that has made a huge difference with you, because you would not have known, first of all, that you were pregnant, and you caught it. At that time, you said, okay, I'm going to test, because you noticed that your temperatures remained high. And that's the thing with the charting, why it's so important, and is because if you get 14 days of high temperatures after the big dip, which means you ovulated, you can do a pregnancy test, and it should be accurate at that point. I mean, 9 times out of 10, if it's still high 16 days after, then you are pregnant. So that gives you a clue. And then when we talked about your test results for the Dutch, we knew that you were a little bit low in your progesterone, right?
Yep.
During that phase.
Yep.
So were you supplementing with the cream, like progesterone cream, during that cycle too, or just did you start right away when you found out?
No, I was already using the progesterone cream.
Yeah, and because according to your results, if you don't mind us talking about results in front of everybody, okay, Emilee's so great. So if you looked at Emilee's results, what it was showing is that her progesterone was low and her estradiol was very high. So it was called estrogen dominance, where we just don't have enough of the progesterone to continue on a healthy cycle. So I think that, it's important to realize that those things they have to be addressed. So you're already taking the progesterone cream, and you continued to take it throughout the first trimester, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And I think that's made a big difference too, because, without that support, sometimes we don't know if, we would have had just a long cycle and, not had the best outcome. But it's always great to know what your hormones are like, beforehand.
It made a huge difference. And I didn't really mention this before, but my husband and I actually worked with a fertility clinic like a few years ago, and I had done Clomid, and my progesterone wasn't high enough. So I had a really, really short pregnancy because of that. So where there was issues with that, where now I'm like, wow, I wish I would have done the hormone testing back then. So I kind of already knew what was going on instead of kind of finding out the hard way.
That's it. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that everyone tells us, and why I put this together is because they're like, I wish I would have known this, and some clinics are really proactive and they're going to give you the progesterone, but a lot of times with a medicated cycle or an IUI, timed intercourse, you're not going to get that progesterone support. But it's always better to treat it before you get pregnant. And then once you realize that you are pregnant and you have a progesterone deficiency, then you have to start right away. And sometimes it's a little too late. So it's like, you need to start a little bit like after ovulation is what we recommend. So just knowing your body, I think this has made such a huge difference in the way that you approach your cycles, first of all, and also, now that you're pregnant, you know what to do, and like what's important as far as your nutritional needs and all of that. And I just think the goal is not always just to get pregnant; it's to have a healthy pregnancy.
Right.
And as women with PCOS, we have more of a risk of gestational diabetes and hypertension. So there's some things that, unless we address them beforehand, we can be at a bigger risk for sure. So you did the work, and I'm proud of you. And it's not to say everything's going to be, you're not going to have nausea and you're not going to feel tired.
Right.
You're going to have some things that I just think that you're off to a really great start. And if you can still continue on all the things that we talk about in the program as far as dietary recommendations and all that during pregnancy, and have a healthy pregnancy, because what works to get pregnant is also what works to stay pregnant a lot of times. So when you said that you tried other treatments, like that was what you did before, was a medicated cycle or Clomid, right?
Yeah. So I think it was about 4 years ago. I had worked with a few different people. I kept getting like sent off to the next person, but I think we did Clomid for, I don't remember what the max amount of months is that you're supposed to do it, but we did it like a few months. So I would take Clomid, but then they also prescribed something else so that I would get my period again the next month. And then we would just kind of like cycle that. And that was for a few months. And then we tried like a different kind of medication along with like progesterone shot. And we got pregnant, but it was very short. And then we tried one more month and just decided at that point they recommended like shots, the shots. I don't know. Yeah. And we just decided to take a step back, and I wanted to find a way with like nutrition and stuff to get a hold on this. So that's kind of where
there you are.
Yeah.
And it's not to say like those definitely have their place. We work a lot with women who are in medicated cycles, and so I think it's really important to recognize that everybody has their way, and that what works for some might not work for others. But I think it's always a good idea to get healthy before you do any of that, and it always is there. You can always go do the medicated route. But I think that it's great to have that approach of getting healthy first and then going into whatever you need to do, and we usually say try like 3 to 6 months of just, if you can, with PCOS, it's definitely going to give your body that much time to start balancing your hormones naturally by improving your diet, exercising, making sure your supplement regimen is good, and doing some hormone testing for sure. And sometimes we recommend acupuncture, but in your case, I don't think you went.
Oh, I did.
You did do acupuncture?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I found them locally. Yep, I found somebody locally.
Oh, you did? Okay, great. So did you do it like on a weekly basis, or how often were you getting?
I think it was, I'm trying to think of how we did it throughout my cycle. I think it was like every 10 days, I believe, or something like that.
Okay.
And then that's what we're doing right now too, is every 10, or maybe it's 2 weeks now. Sorry, I get my.
Yeah, and there's some great acupuncture points for nausea too. If you have any nausea and all that, it's really something that we try to preempt or treat in the beginning before it gets really, much worse. So it's good that you're seeing an acupuncturist for sure. And so really wherever you are in your journey, it's where you need to be. You just need to have patience, I think, with yourself. And it's not a race, but definitely in your case, when you gave your body what it needed, it responded. Like, okay, I'm ready now,
Yeah. Yep.
So, and I know you say you have family members of PCOS.
Yep.
Have they also struggled like you have, or are they, you said they treated it with other means, but I guess like if you could give them any advice, or if you have a best friend who's struggling, what would you tell them?
My sister is actually trying to conceive as well. So I have been talking to her a little bit, but I guess my advice would just be to give yourself time, and the space to heal however you need to heal, whether it is with, medication, or if you want to do it, another way, but to just have patience and to find somebody that will help you. Because I know that I had a hard time around here. Like I would try to find, I'm up in small town Iowa, by the way. Okay. I would try to find a dietitian or like my family doctor. I would ask them for help, and there wasn't a lot of like knowledge there. So there was only so much suggestions I could get. So I think it's really important to find somebody that has done the work to like know what they're talking about, and that's willing to help you and answer all of the emails that you send and ask all the questions.
There's a lot of questions that come up.
There's a lot of questions. And I think that's why that group is so great too, is because you can post the questions or they're already answered before you even think of them. And you're like, yes.
I know. And sometimes we'll do Facebook Live Q&As and everyone like, they're questions. Awesome. They're like, no, I don't have any questions. Because we do talk a lot about strategies and different things. And it's helpful to know what other people are going through, because, everyone does, post their story in the group, and it kind of gets an idea of like, and a lot of people will think I'm just the only one. I used to think I was the only one going through all this. And then you realize, wait, no, there's somebody else that has the same scenario. And it's really important, I think, to acknowledge that.
I agree.
So I think that, learning what's good for your body and all of that is so important. And I'm really so glad that you decide to have that patience with yourself and go ahead and start in that process. And I can't wait to hear about your pregnancy and how everything goes for you. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with everyone. And we will catch you guys next week. Have a wonderful week, everyone.